Nvidia released a new driver today, and we need to provide some backstory because there's been a lot of craziness happening with Nvidia drivers. So Nvidia had originally released a new driver a few days ago. This was driver number 595.59, which was supposed to have the game-ready driver for Resident Evil Requiem. However, they had to pull this driver immediately because it was causing disastrous problems for a lot of users, including major fan issues on all sorts of graphics cards. There were other reported problems. So this is one of the only times I've ever seen Nvidia actually pull one of their driver releases, so you couldn't even get it. Now, today, we have the driver release of 595.71, which is now the official Resident Evil Requiem supported driver, and I do have testing available in that video. But what you'll see here in this initial scene is it has not performed as well as the older driver 576.88. And now, I will say that performance varies by scene and by GPU. I've got two different graphics cards tested today on three different driver versions, including a 40 series GPU and a 50 series GPU, and I've tested RE Requiem in three different scenes. However, when I noticed that performance wasn't as good as 576.88, and as I noted in my previous video looking at 591.86 versus 576.88, you could watch that video, I released it yesterday. I noticed that when performance is lower on the newer driver, the wattage the GPU is pulling is also lower. Notice here there's a significant gap between how many watts this is using compared to the same 4070 Ti Super in the same scene of the same game. The only thing I changed is the driver. Here we're at 264.4 watts, right? That's a big swing. And I noticed similar power differentials when testing out a 50 series GPU as well. So I was curious and had my eye out for what would happen to the watts on the new driver when we got it, which we got today, 595.71, and notice the watts are just ever so slightly higher than 591.86, and performance is ever so slightly higher in this intro opening scene of the game where you're on the street. Performance is at 61 FPS average by the end of, a little 30-second clip for the benchmark, and on 591.86, it was at 57. So we've got a 7% improvement. But remember, the older driver, 576.88, was pulling 70 FPS in this same scene. And I have side-by-side footage where you can see that the game looks the same. It's just that on the newer drivers, performance is worse, and the wattage is lower than on the older driver. So before we get into the rest of the RE Requiem results, I want to mention that I was starting to Google search like power driver versions, all of that, and this video popped up. This is from Bang for Buck PC Gamer. This just released a few hours ago, and I'll link all my sources in the video description. And I noticed he was saying that his overclock is gimped on driver version 595.71. That's the new one that just released today. And in this video, he shows that in compared against previous drivers, he was able, and this is just even against driver number 591.74, which already in RE Requiem, I want to be clear, was not drawing as much power. Let's see, I had 591.86, but the point is that when he's comparing his two drivers here, fairly recent drivers against each other, he's seeing that 595.71, when he tries to bump up his voltage, the GPU is no longer responding to that and drawing the voltage the way it used to, and he's getting lower clock speeds and significantly lower benchmark results. So I'm curious if in these different driver versions, there is something being changed with the way the GPUs draw power, how they respond to different voltages and wattages and all sorts of stuff. And I'm not an overclocking expert, but like I said, I'll link this video in the video description so you can check that out and see some benchmark numbers for attempting to do the same overclock on the same GPU with the same voltage increase, but getting significantly worse results on the newer card. And like I said, I'm mostly just testing out RE Requiem today, but I wonder if in the end, there's something going on there to explain what's happening. And I want to remind you that NVIDIA has been proudly claiming that they've been generating a lot more programming code by use of AI for their coding. So NVIDIA I've been seeing a bunch of comments on my channel, especially on my previous video testing out these driver versions, saying the older driver worked better, where there's a lot of comments saying this is NVIDIA vibe coding and it's catching up with them. Now, I don't want to claim to be a driver code expert, but I don't know, guys. Now, it's possible that maybe this is intentional behavior, trying to make the GPUs somehow more efficient or something like that. But if you're getting significantly less performance than you used to because they're changing how it operates, that doesn't seem great. So anyway, let's go ahead and run through the RE Requiem results. I'm going to make myself tiny. So I'm kind of out of the way here. So on the left, we have 591.86, which was the newest driver up until today. On the far right, we have 595.71. And in the middle, we have the older driver, 576.88. And here we see the older drivers hitting 70 FPS at the same settings. So significantly faster. Now, it's important to note that not every scene shows this behavior. This is the central hallway in the hospital near the beginning of the game. And here we can see all the drivers perform about the same. 96 FPS versus 98 on the older one and 97 on the one released today. So there's not a lot of difference here. I wouldn't make a lot out of it. But notice in this scene, all of them are drawing about 280 watts. So it's actually, in this scene at least, they're drawing similar amounts of power. And it's interesting that different scenes are behaving differently. The third scene that I tested, this is still on that 4070 Ti Super at 1440p max settings, path tracing, DLSS performance. Here we're once again seeing all the driver versions performing about the same. This is the first minute or so of the intro cutscene, and I'm seeing 113 FPS versus 114 and 114. So there's not a lot in it. But what's interesting is not only do different scenes perform differently, I also noticed that different GPUs perform differently. So I'm going to jump forward in my footage here, and we're going to switch over to testing a 50 series GPU. I went with the 5090. So if we slot in the 5090 here through the same three scenes, notice that, again, in this intro scene on the street, this is now 4K, not 1440p, but it's still max settings plus path tracing with DLSS performance. We're seeing that the oldest driver hits 87 FPS, whereas the new driver hits 72, and the newest driver as of yesterday was 591.86, and that's hitting 70. So I'm getting 3% more performance than I did yesterday, but the old driver is still hitting 87 FPS. That is significantly faster. And like I said, I'm not spotting visual differences in the scene. And again, let me actually go back a second there before it switches over to the next scene. And let me jump backwards here, because we should also look at the wattage. So if you weren't watching it, 480 watts on the driver 591.86. Today's driver, 502. So we're getting a little bit more power draw and a little bit more performance, but driver 576.88 is hitting 530 watts. So it's drawing significantly more power and it's getting significantly more performance. I think that's interesting. Now, also interesting, remember this scene, the central hallway scene, when we were on the 4070 Ti Super, I was not seeing meaningfully different performance between the driver versions. But here, driver 595.71, the one we got released today, is actually matching the old driver now, 576.88, where both of them, well, actually, it's a little bit faster than that one, and both of them are noticeably faster than 591.86. And if you look at the power draw, what's interesting is, again, the old driver and the new driver are both around that 570 watt range, whereas the driver 591.86 is closer to 520 watts. And here's the third scene that I tested. This is the intro cutscene. And similar to the central hallway, I'm noticing in this case, the newest driver is the best performer. So 595.71 is hitting 134 FPS, whereas the old 576.88 is hitting 130 FPS. And the driver that was newest as of yesterday, 591.86, is the slowest here at 114 FPS. So this is really weird. And again, the only game I've tested here is RE Requiem, because really, I was just trying to make videos about Resident Evil Requiem testing the performance, but it just became apparent that the driver version was causing some major performance differences, so I went ahead and was testing that out. The purpose of this video isn't really a larger investigation into Nvidia driver versions. That's not really the point of the video. But like I said, I will link Bang for Buck PC Gamer's video where he shows that 595.71 performs differently on the voltage when he's trying to overclock compared to 591.74. So it's I think maybe worth looking into, but I don't know if I have the time to do it. Whether these kinds of performance differences are showing up in a wider variety of games. So I certainly think it'd be an interesting investigation, but I'm just being honest, guys. I teach full-time on top of running this channel. I'm not sure I have a chance to run multiple GPUs through a bunch of different games on a bunch of different drivers, especially if it needs to be multiple scenes in the same games to test for, because different scenes seem to be performing differently, at least in RE Requiem. That might be a little bit beyond what I'm able to do here. Maybe I'll find the time over a weekend in the future. It's certainly nothing I can do immediately. But I think it might be worth looking into, because are we getting just generally downgraded performance on newer drivers? Are people losing out on their overclocks, or at least some of the performance in their overclocks? There's certainly something strange happening here. And is vibe coding to blame? I don't know. That's above my pay grade, but it's certainly an interesting question. Let me know what you guys see performance-wise in your games on the different driver versions, and I hope all of you have an excellent day. Oh, and I also meant to mention that because this driver version does support Resident Evil Requiem directly, now if you're looking at doing the DLSS model overrides, you can actually do that from the Nvidia app now. You don't have to go to Nvidia Profile Inspector. So that's good news, at least for tweaking the game. All right, hope all of you have an excellent day.